The morphine couldn't dull the pain of what I saw in that text message. There I was, Michelle, 35 years old, lying in a sterile hospital bed with tubes snaking from my arms like plastic vines, my body screaming from a lupus flare-up so severe I could barely lift my head from the pillow. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, that antiseptic smell burning my nostrils, and my joints felt like someone had filled them with ground glass and lit them on fire. Each breath was a battle. Each heartbeat reminded me I was fighting for my life. And that's when my phone vibrated. Mrs. Davis, my mother's dear friend, the elderly black woman from next door who'd known me since I was in diapers, who'd attended every birthday party, who'd held my hand at Mama's funeral 4 years ago. The photo loaded slowly. Hospital Wi-Fi is always trash, isn't it? And when it finally appeared on my screen, my heart stopped. A for sale sign, planted in my mother's yard, not just any yard. The yard where Mama grew her prized roses, where she taught me to ride a bike, where we'd buried our family dog Rex under the oak tree when I was 12. The 3-bedroom house on Chicago's South Side that still smelled like her famous peach cobbler, where every floorboard held a memory, where the walls echoed with Sunday dinners and laughter and love. The house my mother Patricia, rest her soul, had explicitly left to me and my brother Anthony in her will. The house that gold-digging witch, Karen, my father's new wife, had no right to touch. But there it was, listed for $450,000, while I lay there fighting for my life, too weak to even walk to the bathroom without assistance. You know what the worst part was? The text from Mrs. Davis said people had been touring it, strangers, walking through my mother's sacred space, Karen playing hostess like she owned the place, probably already spending that money in her head, planning her Florida retirement while I was hooked up to IV drips and heart monitors. My hands shook. Whether from rage or the lupus, I couldn't tell. Probably both. As a black woman, I'd already spent the past month fighting doctors who didn't believe the severity of my pain, nurses who questioned if I was exaggerating, a system that statistically treats women who look like me as if we're lying about our suffering. And now this, my own family trying to steal my inheritance while I was at my most vulnerable. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. I wanted to rip these tubes out and drive straight to that house But then I remembered something my stepmother Karen didn't know, something that made my lips curve into the smallest, coldest smile despite the pain ravaging my body. I owned the bank that held their mortgage. If you want to see how this revenge unfolds and how I made Karen regret every single decision she ever made, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Let me take you back to where this all began. Back to 2015, when the word cancer first shattered our world like a brick through glass. My mother, Patricia Johnson, was 53 years old when the doctor said, breast cancer, stage 3, in that clinical voice they use when they're trying to distance themselves from the devastation they're delivering. I was 25, fresh out of graduate school with my MBA, working my first real job at Chicago First National Bank. Anthony was 22, still figuring out his path. Mama fought like a warrior for 3 years. Chemo, radiation, surgeries. She endured it all with this quiet dignity that made everyone around her stronger. I remember the hospital smell from those years, industrial disinfectant trying to mask something deeper, something sadder, death lurking in sanitized hallways. But when Mama came home between treatments, she'd fill our Southside house with the scent of peach cobbler, her signature dish. The sweetness of cinnamon and brown sugar would chase away the hospital's ghost. "Baby girl," she told me one Sunday afternoon as we sat on the porch of that 3-bedroom house, the one her parents had bought in 1968 during the fair housing struggles, "you need to build your empire in silence. Don't let anyone know how much power you have until you need to use it." I was working my way up at the bank then, putting in 70-hour weeks, proving myself twice as hard because I was black and female in a white male industry. But Mama saw something in me. She'd scraped together $20,000 from her teacher's pension and given it to me. "Invest it smart," she said. "In yourself, in your future." I took that money and bought stock in Chicago First National, the very bank where I worked. It was risky, betting on my own employer, but I believed in the institution. More importantly, I believed in myself and my ability to rise there. Patricia passed away in March 2018, peacefully in her sleep after a particularly brutal round of treatment. She was only 56. The house, that sacred space filled with 3 generations of memories, Sunday dinners around the oak table, photographs lining the hallways showing grandparents who'd migrated from Mississippi, who'd survived Jim Crow, who'd built something to pass down. She left it to Anthony and me. The will was crystal clear. I still remember the lawyer reading it in his downtown office. "I leave my home at 4732 South Prairie Avenue to my children, Michelle and Anthony Johnson, in equal shares. My husband John shall have a life estate, meaning he may live there until his death. But the property cannot be sold or mortgaged without both Michelle and Anthony's written consent." My father John was 58 then, a good man. A mechanic who'd worked with his hands for 35 years, who'd loved my mother deeply, but had been worn down by watching her suffer. I saw it in his eyes at the funeral. He was hollowed out, a shell of the man who used to carry me on his shoulders. I threw myself into work after Mama died. Grief became fuel. I climbed from associate to manager to assistant vice president by 2020. And that stock I'd bought? Chicago First National merged with a larger regional bank, and my shares multiplied in value. Through careful maneuvering and additional investments, I became one of the institution's largest individual shareholders. I was building my empire in silence, just like Mama taught me. 6 months after we buried Patricia, my father met Karen Mitchell at a grief support group. I'll never forget the first time he brought her around. It was September 2018, and I'd stopped by the house to bring Dad some groceries. There she was, a 47-year-old white woman with bleached blonde hair, designer sunglasses perched on her head, Gucci, I noted, and a Louis Vuitton purse that probably cost $3,000. "Michelle, honey, this is Karen," Dad said, his voice carrying a lightness I hadn't heard in months. "She lost her husband 2 years ago. We've been talking and, well, it's so wonderful to finally meet you," Karen gushed, pulling me into an uninvited hug. Her perfume was overwhelming, something expensive and cloying. "Your father talks about you constantly, a vice president at a bank. So impressive for someone so young." There was something in the way she said impressive that made my skin crawl, like she was sizing me up, calculating my worth. Over dinner, I'd insisted on cooking Mama's pot roast recipe. Karen talked about her journey through loss. Her late husband had left her comfortable, but not wealthy, she claimed. She'd had to downsize significantly after his death, yet those designer accessories told a different story. Either she was lying about her financial situation, or she had seriously misplaced priorities. "This house is so quaint," Karen said, glancing around the dining room. The same room where 4 generations of my family had celebrated birthdays, holidays, life itself. Very vintage, lots of potential if someone wanted to modernize it. "Our mother restored it herself," I said, my voice flat. Every detail was intentional. "Oh, of course, I didn't mean—" Karen's hand flew to her chest. "I just meant it has such good bones. John, you must be so proud of what Patricia accomplished." But her eyes had already moved past the family photos on the walls, past Mama's carefully chosen paint colors, and landed on the antique china cabinet where Patricia's jewelry box sat. My mother's modest collection, nothing extravagant, mostly sentimental pieces from her mother and grandmother. I watched Karen's gaze linger there, calculating. After dinner, my brother Anthony called from Atlanta. I stepped onto the porch to talk. "So what do you think of Dad's new friend?" he asked. "Sis," I said, keeping my voice low. "She's a gold digger. I'd bet money on it. Did you see those designer labels?" She's performing poverty while wearing $5,000 in accessories. Watch your back, Anthony warned. Dad's vulnerable right now. He's not thinking straight. I know, I said, watching through the window as Karen laughed too loud at something Dad said, her hand on his arm. I know. The courtship was swift. Too swift. By December, Karen had basically moved in. By Valentine's Day 2019, Dad proposed. They married in June 2020 in a ceremony that cost him $30,000, money he'd been saving for retirement. Karen insisted on the Four Seasons, an open bar, a designer dress. I watched him drain his savings account for a woman who'd been in his life less than 2 years. I attended the wedding in a simple black dress. Anthony flew in, equally unimpressed. We smiled for photos and kept our mouths shut because Dad looked happy, or at least, he looked less sad. Isn't she wonderful? Dad asked me at the reception, his eyes glassy from champagne. I never thought I'd feel this way again. I'm glad you're happy, Dad, I said, meaning it. Sort of. What he didn't know, what Karen certainly didn't know, was that 3 months before the wedding, Chicago First National had completed its merger. My investment portfolio had exploded in value. The board had restructured, and through some very strategic proxy voting and alliance building, I'd positioned myself as a majority shareholder. At 30 years old, I effectively owned the bank where I worked, the bank that held my father's mortgage, the bank where Karen had just opened her new joint account with Dad, transferring her meager savings while eyeing his pension and Social Security like a hawk studying a field mouse. If she only knew who really held the power in this scenario, she might have thought twice about what came next. But Karen Mitchell was about to learn a very expensive lesson about underestimating Black women who build their empires in silence. October 2022. I was 32 years old when my body declared war on itself. It started with fatigue, not regular tired, the kind of exhaustion where lifting a coffee cup felt like bench pressing a car. Then came the joint pain. My fingers swelled like sausages. My knees screamed with every step. A butterfly-shaped rash spread across my face like I'd been slapped by an invisible hand. Lupus, the rheumatologist said after 3 months of tests. Systemic lupus erythematosus. Your immune system is attacking your own tissues. As a Black woman, I knew the statistics before she said them. We're 3 times more likely to develop lupus than white women, and we tend to get hit harder, younger, with more severe complications. The disease doesn't play fair, and neither does the healthcare system that treats it. For a year, I managed it. Medication, lifestyle changes, regular monitoring. I kept working, kept climbing, made senior vice president by spring 2023. But in September 2023, I had a flare-up so severe it landed me in Northwestern Memorial's intensive care unit. The pain was unlike anything I'd ever experienced. Imagine your joints filled with shards of glass, then set on fire, then crushed in a vise. That was my knees, my elbows, my fingers. My kidneys started failing. Lupus nephritis, they called it. Fluid filled my lungs. I couldn't breathe without feeling like I was drowning. They put me in a hospital bed with tubes everywhere, IV lines pumping immunosuppressants and steroids into my veins, oxygen tubes in my nose, catheter, heart monitor, beeping its rhythm like a countdown clock. The fluorescent lights buzzed 24 hours a day, the antiseptic smell mixed with my own sweat, that sour, sick smell of a body at war with itself. My father visited 3 times in the first week, 3 times in 7 days while his daughter fought for her life. Karen's not feeling well, he explained on day 4, not meeting my eyes. She's overwhelmed managing the house alone. Managing the house. My mother's house. The house where I'd grown up, where Patricia had raised us, where every memory was sacred. Karen was overwhelmed playing housewife while I literally had organ failure. Karen herself never came. Not once. She doesn't do well with hospitals, Dad said weakly. They remind her of losing her first husband. But I knew the truth. Karen didn't come because she didn't care. I was an obstacle, not family. And obstacles are easier to ignore when they're out of sight. The doctors were their own battle. I had a young white resident who kept suggesting my pain was psychosomatic, a nurse who questioned whether I really needed that much pain medication, the systemic racism in healthcare that treats Black women's pain as exaggeration, our suffering as performance. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is your pain? They'd ask. 9, I'd gasp. They'd write down 6 and give me Tylenol. Mrs. Davis, dear Mrs. Davis, who was 78 years old and had arthritis herself, took 3 buses to visit me every other day. She'd sit beside my bed, hold my hand with her warm, weathered fingers, and tell me stories about my mother. "Patricia was so proud of you, baby," she'd say. "She knew you'd be something special. She knew you were strong enough to weather any storm." I didn't feel strong. I felt like I was dying in that sterile room, abandoned by my father, ignored by his gold-digging wife, questioned by doctors who didn't believe me. I felt vulnerable in a way I'd never experienced, helpless, alone. That's when evil people strike, you know? When you're at your lowest, most defenseless moment. That's when they show their true nature. That's when Karen made her move. 3 weeks into my hospitalization, my phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Mrs. Davis. Just a photo at first, no explanation. My vision was blurry from the medication. Steroids do that, make everything soft around the edges. But when the image finally focused, my blood turned to ice water in my veins. A for sale sign, red and white, cheerful and obscene, planted in the front yard of 4th 732 South Prairie Avenue. My mother's house. My house. Then Mrs. Davis called. "Child," her voice was shaking with fury, "there's people coming through. Real estate lady brought a couple by this morning. Karen's showing them around like she owns the place. I thought you should know." My hands trembled so violently, I nearly dropped the phone. "Mrs. Davis, I need you to take more pictures. Everything. The sign, the agent, anyone who comes by. Can you do that for me?" "Already on it, baby." I got my grandson teaching me how to use this smartphone camera. I'm documenting everything. The next text came 30 minutes later, a screenshot of a real estate listing. Charming 3BR 2BA Southside home, $450,000. Motivated seller. Below the photos of my house, rooms filled with my mother's furniture, walls covered in my family's pictures, was a description that made my stomach turn. Estate sale. Sellers relocating to Florida. Quick close possible. Estate sale. Like my mother's legacy was a garage sale. Like 30 years of memories could be liquidated for Karen's retirement fund. I called Anthony immediately. He answered on the first ring, and I heard Atlanta traffic in the background. "They're selling the house," I said, my voice breaking. "Karen listed it. Dad must have signed off." "They're selling Mama's house while I'm in the hospital." "What?" Anthony's roar was so loud a nurse stuck her head in to check on me. "I'm booking a flight right now. Don't do anything until I get there." But I was already scrolling through my phone with shaking fingers, finding the number for Patricia's estate lawyer. He answered on the third ring. "Michelle, how are you feeling?" "They're trying to sell my mother's house without my consent. Karen forged something. She must have. The will was clear. Anthony and I both have to approve any sale." Papers rustled on his end. "Let me pull the file. Stay on the line." 2 minutes felt like 2 hours. Around me, monitors beeped. My heart rate was spiking. The machine started alarming. A nurse rushed in, but I waved her away. "Michelle," the lawyer said finally, his voice grim, "I'm looking at a notarized document filed last week claiming transfer of full ownership to John and Karen Johnson as joint tenants. The signature allegedly yours. Did you sign anything?" "I've been in ICU for 3 weeks. I haven't signed anything." "Then we have clear fraud, document forgery, attempted theft of property. This is criminal." My mind raced despite the morphine fog. Karen had forged my signature. She'd manipulated my father, a man weakened by age and loss and his own health problems, into believing they could just erase Patricia's will. And she'd done it while I was fighting for my life, when I was too sick to fight back. Later, Anthony arrived with his laptop. We found Karen's text messages. Dad had left his phone unlocked during one of his rare visits, and Anthony had the password. What we discovered made me want to vomit. Karen to John. This old dump from his ex? We'll cash in and buy that condo in Florida. Michelle's too sick to notice or care. Karen to her realtor friend. Push this fast. The daughter's hospitalized. Son's out of state. Clean sale. Quick commission for both of us. Karen to her sister. Finally getting what we deserve. John's been sitting on a gold mine while playing poor. That girl won't even know until it's done. They thought I was too weak, too sick, too distracted by my own mortality to notice or care that they were stealing my mother's legacy. What Karen didn't understand, what she couldn't possibly have known, was that Patricia had raised a fighter, a strategist, a woman who built her power in silence and waited for exactly the right moment to use it. Anthony and I sat in that hospital room, his laptop balanced on the rolling tray table, and mapped out our response. We could go to the police right now, he said. Fraud, forgery, elder abuse. No, I interrupted, my voice steady despite the rage burning in my chest. We do this my way, patient, calculated. I want Karen to feel every single consequence of her choices, not all at once, slowly. I want her to watch everything she tried to steal crumble in her grasping hands. Anthony looked at me, then smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Mom would be proud of you right now, you know that? Mom taught me to build my empire in silence, I said, pulling up my bank account on my phone, the account that showed I was the majority shareholder in Chicago First National Bank, the bank that held Dad and Karen's mortgage, the bank where all their financial sins were documented and traceable. But Mom also taught me that when someone threatens your family, you don't just defend, you dismantle them. I chose the sage path that night, not the quick satisfaction of immediate confrontation, but the long game, the patient unraveling of Karen's greed thread by thread until she had nothing left but the consequences of her own actions. Karma wouldn't handle this one. I would. 4 weeks in the hospital felt like 4 years. But eventually, my kidneys stabilized, the fluid drained from my lungs, and the doctors deemed me well enough to continue recovery at home. Home. The word tasted bitter on my tongue now. Anthony drove me back on a crisp October afternoon. The autumn leaves were brilliant, oranges and reds and golds, but all I could see was that for sale sign growing larger as we turned onto South Prairie Avenue. You ready for this? Anthony asked, his hands tight on the steering wheel. No, I said honestly, but let's go anyway. We pulled into the driveway just as a young couple was walking out the front door. Karen was with them, all smiles and charm in a designer pantsuit I knew she'd charged to Dad's credit card. Her face fell when she saw our car. Michelle! She rushed over as Anthony helped me out. I was still weak, still unsteady on my feet. Oh, honey, you're back! We thought you'd be in the hospital another week at least. The concern in her voice was so fake it was almost impressive, like watching a bad actress in a high school play. The doctors released me, I said flatly, leaning on Anthony's arm as we walked toward the porch. The couple Karen had been showing around scurried to their car, clearly uncomfortable with the family drama unfolding. Inside, the house felt violated. Furniture had been moved. Personal photos had been taken down, my mother's face erased to make the place more neutral for buyers. The scent of Patricia's peach cobbler had been replaced by Karen's chemical air freshener, fake vanilla, artificial sweetness covering up rot. My father sat in his recliner, the one piece of furniture Karen hadn't rearranged. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. His mechanic's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he set down his coffee cup. Michelle, he said, but couldn't meet my eyes. You look better. Do I? I moved slowly to the couch, every joint still aching. Dad, why are there strangers touring this house? Karen jumped in before he could answer. We thought this would help with your medical bills. The hospital costs must be astronomical, and we figured... You figured you'd sell my mother's house without asking me? My voice was quiet, but something in my tone made Karen take a step back. This house that was left to Anthony and me in Mom's will? Your mother's gone, Michelle. Karen's sympathy vanished like smoke. Her real face emerged, hard, calculating, cold. We need to think about the living now. Your father needs this money. We need this money for our future. Our future, not the family's future. Not even your father's future. Our future. Karen and John. The us that explicitly excluded me. Dad. I looked at him, waiting, hoping he'd say something, anything, to show he remembered whose daughter I was. He mumbled something about what's best for everyone and new beginnings, and Patricia would want us to be practical. No, Patricia would have wanted her children to have the home she'd fought to keep, the home her parents had bought when black families weren't allowed to own property in half of Chicago, the home that represented 3 generations of survival and dignity. But I didn't say that, not yet. Instead, I smiled, a small, controlled smile that Karen mistook for surrender. I see, I said softly. Well, this has been exhausting. I think I need to rest now. Anthony, can you help me to my old room? As we walked down the hallway, I heard Karen whisper to Dad, "See, she's being reasonable. She understands." In my childhood bedroom, which Karen had also staged by removing my personal belongings, Anthony looked at me with raised eyebrows. "You're way too calm right now," he said. "Should I be worried?" I sat carefully on the bed, my mother's quilt still covering it despite Karen's renovations. "Do you remember what Mom used to say about hunting? That the best hunter isn't the one who shoots first," Anthony recited. "It's the one who waits until the perfect shot." Exactly. I pulled out my phone, already composing a message to my bank's legal department. Karen thinks she's won because I'm not screaming. She thinks sick equals weak, vulnerable equals defeatable. But she's never seen what a black woman who's been underestimated her whole life can do when she stops being polite. I hit send on the message, setting wheels in motion that Karen couldn't even imagine. The warrior doesn't always roar, little brother. Sometimes she waits in silence, watching her prey walk straight into the trap. Downstairs, I could hear Karen on the phone with her real estate agent, laughing about how the daughter's too weak to fight this. Perfect. Let her think that. The hunter was in position now, finger steady on the trigger, breathing calm and even, and Karen had just painted a target on her own back. 2 days later, I returned to work. My doctor had recommended another month of rest, but I needed access. Information is power, and I needed to know exactly what I was dealing with. Chicago First National Bank's headquarters occupied 15 floors of a gleaming tower on LaSalle Street. I'd been climbing these floors for 10 years, from entry-level analyst to senior vice president. Now, as majority shareholder, I had access to everything. "Michelle!" My assistant Janet nearly dropped her coffee when she saw me. "You're back. Should you be back?" "Probably not," I admitted, settling carefully into my office chair. Everything still hurt. Lupus doesn't forgive quickly. "But I need to review some accounts. Personal matter. Can you pull the files for John and Karen Johnson? All accounts, all activity for the past 18 months. Janet's face went carefully neutral. She'd worked for me long enough to know when something was serious. "Of course. Give me 20 minutes. What I found in those files made my blood run cold, then hot with rage. Discovery. Number 1. Karen had been systematically siphoning money from my father's pension. Small transfers at first, $200 here, so $500 there, then larger amounts. In the past year alone, $47,000 redirected from his retirement account to a personal checking account in Karen's name only. Discovery. Number 2. Credit card debt. 8 different cards, all in my father's name, all opened within the past 2 years. Total balance, $83,000. Charges to luxury retailers, spa services, a jewelry store, vacation bookings to Cancun and Miami. My father, who'd worn the same 3 flannel shirts for a decade, suddenly had $83,000 in credit card debt for things he'd never use. Discovery number 3, the mortgage. My parents had paid off the house in 2010, but in 2021, 6 months after Dad married Karen, they'd taken out a new mortgage for $200,000. Home equity line of credit, the document said. The money had been immediately transferred to, guess where, an account in Karen's name. Discovery number 4, Karen's real estate agent friend, Diane Murphy. Cross-referencing transactions showed something interesting: kickback payments. Every property Diane sold, she'd pay a percentage to a consulting company. A consulting company that traced back to, surprise, Karen Mitchell Johnson. I sat back in my leather chair watching the Chicago skyline through my window. The pieces were falling into place like dominoes lined up perfectly, waiting for the first push. Patience, I whispered to myself, channeling my mother's voice. Let her think she's winning. I called the bank's fraud prevention department. Hi, this is Michelle Johnson, SVP. I'm flagging accounts ending in 4793 and 8821 for routine audit. Standard compliance check. Nothing urgent. Routine audit was code for freeze all activity pending investigation. Karen's personal account and the credit cards in my father's name would be unusable within the hour. She'd think it was a computer glitch. She'd call customer service, get bounced around for days before anyone could figure out the problem. Small victory, Burr 1, secured. Anthony had been busy too. He'd taken a leave of absence from his Atlanta job and was staying with Mrs. Davis, documenting everything from next door. Photos of Karen's shopping trips, returning with bags from Neiman Marcus while claiming to be barely scraping by. Videos of her arguments with Dad, voices raised, doors slamming, the masks slipping. Mrs. Davis, bless her soul, had become our eyes and ears. At 78, she was sharper than most people half her age. That woman, Mrs. Ryan Davis told me over tea in her kitchen, her voice shaking with indignation, has been telling neighbors your mother was cold and distant. Said Patricia was difficult and made John miserable. Can you imagine? Patricia, who brought soup to every sick neighbor, who tutored kids for free, who made this block feel like family. That woman is rewriting her story. I documented it all. Every lie, every manipulation, every theft, building a case brick by brick while Karen thought she was building her Florida retirement fund. How long are you going to wait? Anthony asked one evening as we reviewed our evidence on his laptop. Until she can't wriggle free, I said. Until every escape route is closed. Until she realizes she was never hunting me. I was hunting her. The beautiful thing about being underestimated? People tell you their plans because they don't think you can stop them. The beautiful thing about owning the bank? You see everything they're trying to hide. The first cracks appeared 2 weeks after my return home. A young couple, the Hendersons, I later learned, had made an offer on the house. $425,000, below asking but close enough that Karen was salivating. I watched from my bedroom window as she and Diane the realtor celebrated on the front lawn, probably already mentally decorating their Florida condo. Then their title company ran the routine background check. I was drinking tea in the kitchen when I heard Karen shriek. The sound was so sharp, so primal that even my father jumped. "What do you mean there's a dispute?" Karen screamed into her phone. "The title is clear. We own this house." Diane's voice was audible even through the phone speaker. "Karen, there's a recorded claim from Michelle and Anthony Johnson citing the original will. The title company won't insure it until the dispute is resolved. The buyers are walking." Slam! Karen threw her phone across the room. It hit the wall, leaving a dent in the drywall. The phone clattered to the floor, screen cracked. I took another sip of my tea. Chamomile with honey. Soothing. Karen stormed into the kitchen. "This is your fault. You filed something, didn't you? You're sabotaging the sale." I met her eyes calmly. "I'm just following what Mom wanted. The will is ironclad. You need both Anthony's and my written notarized consent to sell this property. Did you think we wouldn't notice? Your father has a life estate. He can live here," I interrupted, my voice still quiet but with steel underneath. He cannot sell it. That's literally what a life estate means, Karen. Maybe you should have read the will before you forged my signature. Her face went pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I stood slowly, using the counter for support. My body still ached, but my mind was sharp as a blade. The notarized document claiming I transferred ownership? The one with my signature that looks nothing like my actual signature? That forgery? John, tell your daughter she's being unreasonable. Karen whirled on my father, who'd been standing in the doorway looking like he wanted to melt into the floor. Dad opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Maybe we should talk to a lawyer? We don't need a lawyer. Well, we need her to stop being selfish. I set down my teacup very carefully. Mrs. Davis makes excellent tea, I said conversationally, as if Karen hadn't just screamed in my face. She's been teaching me her special blend. Did you know she and my mother used to have tea every Sunday for 30 years? They had a ritual. They'd talk about the neighborhood, the changes, the history. Mom told her everything. The threat was subtle but clear. Mrs. Davis was a witness to everything Patricia had wanted, to everything Karen was trying to steal. Karen's jaw clenched so hard I could see the muscle jumping in her cheek. Over the next week, more buyers came. More offers fell through. The title dispute was a brick wall. No title company would insure the sale, which meant no bank would approve a buyer's mortgage. At work, the routine audit of Karen's accounts revealed fascinating irregularities, payment patterns that suggested money laundering, credit card cash advances immediately transferred to offshore accounts, the kind of activity that triggered federal banking regulations. Small victory number 2, secured. I was sitting in my office when a memory surfaced, clear as crystal. I was 8 years old, sitting across from my mother at the kitchen table. She was teaching me to play chess. Control the board, baby girl, she'd said, moving her queen into position. Don't just react to your opponent. Think 3 moves ahead. Control the board, and you control the game. I'd lost that game, and the next 50 games we played, but eventually I'd learned. I'd become patient, strategic. I'd learned to see the whole board, not just the immediate threat. Karen was playing checkers. I was playing chess. And I'd been controlling this board since the moment Mrs. Davis sent me that first photo. The day Karen showed up at my door with a family agreement was the day I knew she was getting desperate. She'd had the document professionally printed, made it look official with fancy letterhead and whereas clauses. The gist, I would sign over my rights to the house in exchange for $50,000. It's a generous offer, she said, all fake sweetness again. More than your share is probably worth, honestly, and you'll have money for your medical bills. I pretended to read through it, taking my time. The forgery was amateur. She'd clearly done it herself this time, not bothering to pay for a professional fake. I'll need to have my lawyer review this, I said finally, handing it back to her. Your lawyer? The mask slipped again. Why? It's straightforward. You sign, you get money, everyone wins. Everyone except me and Anthony, you mean? Everyone except Mom's memory. I tilted my head. Why are you so desperate to sell this house, Karen? What's really going on? We're not. She was flustered now, clutching the document. We just want what's best for the family. Then you won't mind waiting for my lawyer's review. Should take about 4 to 6 weeks. Her face went purple. But what could she say? She left with her fake document, probably to manufacture some new scheme. The beautiful irony? She had no idea she was scheming against the woman who owned her bank, who could see every desperate financial move she made, who was 3 steps ahead in a game. Karen didn't even know she was losing, if she only knew. But then again, the best victories are the ones your enemy never sees coming. The call came from Prestige Pawn on 47th Street. I knew the owner, Marcus, from community business networking events. Michelle, his voice was uncomfortable. I got something here I think you should know about. Woman came in trying to pawn some antique jewelry, said it belonged to her late mother-in-law. But one of the pieces has an inscription. To Patricia, all my love, Mama Rose. My heart stopped. Mama Rose was my great-grandmother. That jewelry, Mom's most treasured possessions, included her mother's wedding ring, her grandmother's pearl necklace, a gold locket with photos of ancestors who'd survived slavery. "Don't buy it," I said, my voice deadly calm. "That's stolen property. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Anthony drove me to the pawn shop. Marcus had the jewelry laid out on a velvet cloth, 7 pieces total, representing 3 generations of Black women who'd fought and sacrificed and survived. "She wanted $8,000 for the lot," Marcus said. "I told her I needed to verify provenance. She got nervous and said she'd come back tomorrow." "She won't be back," I said, photographing each piece, "because she's about to have much bigger problems than needing $8,000. Anthony was shaking with rage. "She tried to sell Mama's jewelry, the jewelry we grew up seeing, the pieces Mama wore to church every Sunday, the family history." "I know." I carefully gathered the pieces, Marcus having no issue releasing them to Patricia's daughter. "Add it to the evidence file." Mrs. Davis had her own revelation that evening. We were on her porch. She wouldn't come to that woman's territory, drinking sweet tea while the sun set. "She's been spreading poison," Mrs. Davis said, her weathered hands wrapped around her glass. "Told the Simmons family that Patricia was cold to John, that the marriage was loveless at the end. Told the Washingtons that Patricia frittered away money and left John destitute." "Mom left Dad a life estate and comfortable retirement funds," I said. "He wasn't destitute until Karen got her claws in him." "I know that, baby. Everyone who knew Patricia knows that. But Karen's telling these lies to the new neighbors, the ones who moved in after your mama passed, making herself look like a savior who rescued poor John. I documented every lie, every slander, building the case. At the bank, my legal department discovered something interesting during their routine audit. The mortgage on 4732 South Prairie had violated terms. My father's income alone couldn't support the payments. Only the additional income from his pension made it work. But Karen had been siphoning that pension money, which meant they'd been defaulting on loan terms for months. Standard bank policy for violated terms, foreclosure proceedings. I sat in the legal department meeting as they discussed it, my face carefully neutral. "We'll need to send notice," the senior counsel said, not realizing he was talking about my father's house. "Standard 30-day warning, then we initiate foreclosure if the violations aren't corrected." "Proceed with policy," I said. My voice didn't shake. "Small victory, Thamur 3, secured." The foreclosure notice arrived on a Tuesday. I heard Karen screaming from my room upstairs. "This is your fault," she shrieked, storming up to pound on my door. "You're sabotaging us. You're using your position at the bank to ruin your own father." I opened the door calmly. "I don't work in foreclosures, Karen. That's a completely different department. They're just following standard policy when loan terms are violated." "What violation? We've been paying." "Have you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Or have you been taking money that should go to the mortgage and spending it on designer bags? The bank doesn't care about intent. They care about terms. You violated the terms." "You jealous bitch!" Her voice went shrill. "You're doing this because you can't keep a man, a bitter spinster who—" "Careful," Anthony's voice came from behind me. He'd been staying in his old room, and the commotion had drawn him out. "I'm recording this conversation. Illinois is a one-party consent state for recordings. Please continue talking about how my sister is a bitter spinster. I'm sure the judge will find it illuminating." Karen's face went white. She'd just handed us another piece of evidence, her own words showing malice, showing this was never about what's best for the family. She retreated downstairs, and I heard her and Dad arguing. His voice was weak, confused. Hers was sharp, accusatory. Then came the sounds I'd been waiting for. Doors slamming, dishes breaking, the marriage cracking apart under its own rotted foundation. I didn't intervene, didn't say a word, just sat in my room, documenting timestamps, making notes, letting it unfold. By the end of the week, Karen's real estate agent friend, Diane, had stopped returning her calls. Apparently, Diane had her own legal troubles brewing. Something about kickback payments and ethics violations. Funny how those things come to light during investigations. The net was tightening. Every exit was closing. Karen was starting to realize something was very, very wrong, but she still didn't understand that she'd never been the hunter. She was the prey, and the trap was about to snap shut. The Henderson family officially withdrew their offer in writing. Karen's real estate career fantasy, collecting that sweet commission on a house she'd manipulated from a hospitalized woman, died with it. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Diane's car pull up. Through the window, I watched what happened next with quiet satisfaction. Karen rushed out, desperate. "Did you get my messages? What about the Patels? They were interested. You said they were—" Karen. Diane's voice was cold in a way it hadn't been before. "I can't represent this property anymore. The title issues, the family disputes, it's too complicated." "Too complicated? You promised me this would be easy. You said quick sale, quick cash." That was before I knew about the will dispute. That was before the fraud allegations. Diane took a step back toward her car. "Karen, I have to protect my license. If you forged documents—" "I didn't—" Karen's voice cracked. "Diane, please. I need this sale. We need this money." "Then you should have thought about that before you tried to steal from John's daughter while she was in the ICU. Diane got in her car. "Lose my number." The screaming that followed was so loud it brought Mrs. Ponte Davis to her window. I caught her eye and we shared a look, two women who'd seen this coming from a mile away. That night, Dad finally asked the question he should have asked months ago. "Karen?" His voice came from the living room. I crept to the top of the stairs to listen. "Did you really forge Michelle's signature on those documents?" Silence. Then, "I did it for US, John, for our future." That's fraud, Karen. That's a crime." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just family paperwork. Michelle's being spiteful because she's jealous. Can't you see that? She can't stand that you found happiness with me." "Happiness?" Dad's voice cracked. "Karen, we're drowning in debt. The bank is threatening foreclosure. My pension is empty. What happened to all that money? I've been managing it, investing it in our future." "What future?" "We can't even make the mortgage payment." Their voices rose, layers of resentment and lies peeling away. I heard something crash, a lamp maybe, more shouting. Dad's voice, stronger than it had been in months, finally asking the questions he should have asked years ago. Small victory number 4 was unfolding in real time. The next morning, Dad came to my room. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. Hadn't slept, eyes red-rimmed. "Michelle?" he said quietly. "Can we talk?" We went to the back porch, away from Karen's ears. The October morning was cold, leaves falling like rain. "I found the credit card statements," he said, "hidden in her office. $83,000, Michelle. $83,000 in charges I never made. Jewelry, clothes, spa days, vacations I never went on." I said nothing, just waited. "And my pension." She said we needed to diversify investments, but the money's just gone. Transferred to accounts I don't have access to. He put his head in his hands. "I've been such a fool." "Yes," I said simply. "You have been." He flinched, but I wasn't going to sugarcoat it anymore. "She moved in fast after Mom died. She isolated you from me and Anthony. She spent your money, forged my signature, tried to steal my mother's house while I was fighting for my life in a hospital bed." My voice was calm but unyielding. "And you let her. Every step of the way, you chose her over your own children." "I was lonely," he whispered. "After your mother, I couldn't bear being alone in this house. And Karen made me feel—" "Feel what, Dad? Young? Desired? Did it feel good to have a younger woman want you? Good enough to ignore what she was doing?" Silence. "I'll fix this," he said finally. "I'll make it right." "Will you?" I looked at him. "Because making it right means testifying against her. It means admitting you were complicit in some of this, even if you were manipulated. It means accepting consequences. He nodded slowly. What do I need to do? What Anthony had captured on recording that week was devastating. Karen admitting to taking the pension money for investment purposes that John didn't need to know about. Karen saying Michelle was too sick and too weak to fight back effectively. Karen discussing with her sister how they'd finally get what we deserve after years of watching John waste money on his kids. Mrs. Davis provided her written testimony, notarized and detailed. She documented every conversation where Patricia had explicitly stated her wishes for the house. Every time Karen had badmouthed Patricia to neighbors, every lie she'd witnessed. The bank's official foreclosure notice arrived with 30 days to cure the default. The amount needed, $87,000 in missed and improperly allocated payments. Karen tried one more desperate move. She came to my room one evening, tears streaming down her face. The performance was Oscar-worthy. Michelle, please, I'm begging you, family helps family, right? I know we've had our differences, but your father loves me. I love him. We can work through this if you just help us with the bank. Talk to them. You have influence there. I looked at her crying face and felt nothing. You're right about one thing, I said softly. Family helps family. And Mom's family, her real family, the ones who loved and honored her, we protect her legacy. That house represents 3 generations of Black women who survived, who built something to pass down. You wanted to sell it for a Florida condo and designer bags. You tried to erase my mother's memory while I was in ICU fighting lupus. You forged my signature. You stole from my father. You pawned my grandmother's jewelry. My voice never rose above conversational, but Karen took a step back anyway. So no, I won't help you. I'll watch you face every single consequence of your choices, and I'll sleep peacefully doing it. You bitch! The mask dropped completely. I hope you're happy. Destroying your father's life. I'm not destroying anything, I said calmly. You did that all by yourself. I'm just stopping you from destroying anything else. She fled downstairs and I heard more screaming, more crashes. The marriage's death throes. Anthony appeared in my doorway. It's almost time, isn't it? Almost, I agreed. Just a few more dominoes to fall. The beautiful thing about patience? The longer you wait, the more rope your enemy uses to hang themselves. Marcus from Prestige. Pawn called me on a Wednesday morning. She came back, he said. The blonde woman, trying to pawn the jewelry again, plus some other pieces. I told her the items were flagged as potentially stolen property, and I'd need to call the police to verify ownership. She ran. Literally ran out of my shop. Did you get it on security camera? Every angle. I'm emailing you the footage now. Small victory. Chapter 5. Attempted theft on video. The criminal complaint was filed that afternoon. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, attempted theft of property, elder abuse. The charges rolled out like thunder. The divorce papers my father served her on Friday were almost anticoagulant. I'd recommended my mother's former attorney, a Black woman named Claudia Warren, who took no prisoners in family court. Your father is a victim here too, Claudia told me in her office. Elder abuse, financial exploitation. We have grounds for criminal charges beyond just the fraud. Karen was served at the house. Anthony and I watched from upstairs as the process server handed her the papers. The sound she made was inhuman, a shriek of rage and disbelief. She stormed up to my room 5 minutes later. Dad tried to stop her, but she shoved past him. You! She pointed a shaking finger at me. You turned him against me. You poisoned him with your lies. I didn't have to, I said calmly. I was sitting in my mother's rocking chair, a cup of tea in my hands. You did all of this yourself. Every lie, every theft, every manipulation, that was all you. I gave up everything for your father. You gave up nothing. You tried to steal everything. I set down my teacup. Mom's house, Dad's retirement, my inheritance. You tried to take it all while I was sick, while you thought I was too weak to stop you. You think you're so smart, so righteous, but you're just a bitter, lonely woman who can't stand to see your father happy. Dad's not happy, Karen. Look at him. I gestured to where my father stood in the doorway, tears streaming down his face. Does he look happy? He looks broken. Because you broke him. The police arrived 20 minutes later, not for the divorce papers, for the criminal complaint. Karen Mitchell Johnson? The officer was professional, calm. We need you to come down to the station to answer some questions regarding charges of fraud and identity theft. I'm not going anywhere. Karen backed away. This is harassment. This is a setup. John, tell them this is all a misunderstanding. Dad said nothing, just looked at the floor. Ma'am, you can come voluntarily or we can arrest you. Your choice. Karen's face cycled through emotions, rage, disbelief, fear, calculation. Then she made a run for it, actually tried to dash past the officers to her car, probably thinking she could flee to Florida, start over, escape consequences. They caught her in the driveway. The handcuffs clicked shut with a sound that echoed in my soul. Click. Justice has its own music. Michelle! Karen screamed as they led her to the police car. Neighbors were coming out to watch now. Mrs. Davis, the Simmons family, the new couple from across the street. Michelle, you can't do this. You're ruining my life. I walked slowly down the porch steps, still weak but steady. Met her eyes across the lawn. No, Karen, I said quietly. You ruined your own life. I just stopped letting you ruin mine. They drove away, her screaming echoing down South Prairie Avenue. That night, my father sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, sobbing. Anthony and I sat with him, not comforting, just present. I let her disrespect your mother's memory, he said between sobs. I let her try to steal from you while you were in the hospital. I chose comfort over integrity, over family. Yes, I said. You did? Can you ever forgive me? I looked at this man who'd carried me on his shoulders as a child, who'd taught me to change a tire, who'd walked me down the aisle at homecoming. Then I looked at this man who'd let a con artist manipulate him into betraying his own daughter. I don't know, Dad, I said honestly. You let her erase Mom. You let her try to steal from me while I was fighting for my life, that I can't forgive easily. He nodded, accepting it. And maybe that acceptance was the first step toward whatever came next. The news spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Karen arrested, fraud charges, tried to steal from her stepdaughter, pawned family jewelry, drained the husband's pension. Mrs. Davis hosted me for tea the next morning. Your mama would be proud, she said, squeezing my hand. Not of the revenge, Patricia wasn't vengeful, but of how you protected her legacy, how you stood firm. I didn't destroy Karen, I said. She destroyed herself. That's exactly right, baby. You just stopped enabling it. There's a difference between revenge and justice. You chose justice. From her kitchen window, I could see my mother's house. The for sale sign was still up, but it wouldn't be for long. The empire built in silence had spoken, and the word was no. The Cook County Courthouse on the first Monday in November was cold and imposing, all marble and echoes, the weight of justice pressing down from vaulted ceilings. Karen's trial proceeded quickly. When the evidence is overwhelming, defense attorneys don't have much room to maneuver. I took the stand on day 2. The prosecutor was a sharp woman named Anderson who knew exactly how to frame the narrative. Ms. Johnson, can you describe your relationship with the defendant? Karen is my father's second wife. She married him 2 years after my mother passed away from cancer. And the property in question, 4732 South Prairie Avenue, how did that come to be involved in this case? I kept my voice calm, factual, devastating. My mother left the house to my brother and me in her will, with a life estate for my father. The will explicitly stated that the property could not be sold without written consent from both Anthony and myself. And did you give that consent? No, why? I was in the ICU at Northwestern Memorial Hospital with a lupus flare-up that nearly killed me. I was on immunosuppressants, steroids, barely conscious most days. I couldn't have signed anything. The prosecutor displayed the forged document on the screen, my supposed signature looking nothing like my actual signature. Yet someone signed your name here. Yes, someone committed fraud and forgery while I was fighting for my life. Anthony testified next. His voice shook with controlled rage as he described finding Karen's text messages, discovering the stolen jewelry, watching our father's savings disappear. She tried to erase our mother, he said, looking directly at Karen. While my sister was in the hospital, potentially dying, this woman tried to erase every trace of the woman who raised us, for money, for a Florida condo. Mrs. Davis was next. At 78, she commanded the courtroom like a preacher at a pulpit. Patricia Johnson was my best friend for 30 years, she said, her voice strong. She was clear about her wishes for that house. It represented generations of struggle, of black families building something to pass down. She wanted her children to have it. She said it explicitly over and over. The house goes to Michelle and Anthony. And Mrs. Mitchell Johnson? The prosecutor asked. Did she know Patricia's wishes? Everyone knew Patricia's wishes. The defendant knew, she just didn't care. Karen's defense attorney, a tired-looking public defender who knew he was playing a losing hand, tried to paint her as a confused widow who made mistakes under stress. It didn't land. Then came the moment I'd been building toward. The prosecutor called character witnesses who discussed my reputation in the community, my career. She was setting up something, I could tell. Ms. Johnson, she said, turning to me for recross, can you tell the court about your position at Chicago First National Bank? I'm a senior vice president. And what does that role entail? I oversee major accounts, regulatory compliance, and strategic investments. Interesting. And are you aware of the foreclosure proceedings against Forest 732 South Prairie Avenue? I paused, letting the tension build. Yes. In your professional capacity, do you have any involvement with those proceedings? Not directly with foreclosure, but as a majority shareholder in the bank, I have oversight of all major policy decisions. The courtroom went silent. You could hear people processing what I'd just said. Karen's face drained of color. Her mouth fell open. The pieces were finally clicking into place for her. Too late, but clicking nonetheless. You own the bank? Her voice was barely a whisper. The judge banged his gavel. The defendant will remain silent. But Karen was standing now, pointing at me, her composure completely shattered. You set me up. You used your position to sabotage us. You manipulated everything. Ms. Mitchell Johnson, sit down, the judge ordered. She's been working against us this whole time. She froze our accounts. She started the foreclosure. Bang! The gavel again. Bailiff, restrain the defendant. As they pulled Karen back to her seat, the prosecutor smiled slightly. Your Honor, I'd like to note that Ms. Johnson exercised legal oversight as a bank shareholder. The defendant, meanwhile, committed fraud, forgery, identity theft, and elder abuse. There's a clear difference between legal business practices and criminal behavior. The judge nodded. Agreed. The defendant's outburst is noted. Continue. My father took the stand that afternoon. It was the hardest part. Watching him testify against the woman he'd married, admitting how he'd been manipulated, how he'd failed to protect his own daughter. I was grieving, he said, his voice breaking. After Patricia died, I couldn't function. I was drowning. Karen seemed like a life raft. I didn't see that she was actually an anchor pulling me under. And your daughter, Michelle? The prosecutor asked gently. What was your relationship with her during this time? I failed her. Tears streamed down his face. She was in the hospital fighting for her life, and I let my wife try to steal from her. I chose comfort over family. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make that right. Karen's defense rested without calling her to testify. Too risky given her courtroom outburst. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. On the charge of fraud in the first degree, guilty. On the charge of forgery, guilty. On the charge of identity theft, guilty. On the charge of attempted theft of property, guilty. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty. Karen sobbed. Her attorney put a hand on her shoulder, but she shook him off. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, just a quiet sense of completion. Justice isn't revenge. It's simply the natural consequence of actions meeting accountability. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted statements. I kept it brief. My mother taught me to build strength in silence and use it to protect what matters. This case was about protecting her legacy and ensuring that vulnerable people, whether sick in hospitals or grieving their spouses, aren't exploited by those they trust. I'm grateful for the justice system working as intended. Anthony hugged me tight. Mama would be proud, sis. Maybe, I said. Or maybe she'd just say, this is what you do. You stand up. You fight back. You protect family. The empire built in silence had spoken its verdict, and the word was guilty. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Karen stood before the judge in an orange jumpsuit, all her designer clothes and pretensions stripped away. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. The judge was a black woman in her 60s named Deborah Williams. She'd read every piece of evidence, every testimony. Ms. Mitchell Johnson, she began, her voice carrying the weight of decades on the bench. You targeted a family in their most vulnerable moments. You exploited a grieving widower. You forged documents to steal from a woman fighting a chronic illness in a hospital bed. You attempted to erase the legacy of a black woman who built something to pass to her children. Karen opened her mouth, but Judge Williams continued. The court recognizes that prison time for a first-time offender is unusual in such cases, but the aggravating factors here are significant. The predatory nature of your actions, the vulnerability of your victims, and your complete lack of remorse, evidenced by your courtroom behavior, warrants serious consequences. 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, full restitution of all stolen funds, approximately $87,000 plus damages, civil judgment in favor of Michelle and Anthony Johnson for attempted theft, valued at $450,000, and a permanent restraining order preventing you from contacting the Johnson family. Karen's knees buckled. The bailiff had to steady her. Additionally, the judge continued, all assets acquired during your marriage to John Johnson through fraudulent means will be liquidated to pay restitution and damages. The Florida condo Karen had been eyeing never existed. Her dream retirement? Evaporated. The designer bags, the jewelry she'd bought with Dad's money, the car she'd leased in his name, all of it seized, auctioned, liquidated. In the hallway afterward, Claudia Warren, my father's attorney, handed me a folder. The divorce is final. Your father retained the life estate in the property, which will revert fully to you and Anthony upon his death. Karen gets nothing from the marriage. Prenup stipulations for fraud and elder abuse. The house was secured in our names, officially and irrevocably. The title was clear. The legacy was protected. Mrs. Davis helped me take down the for sale sign that afternoon. We carried it to the curb with the rest of the garbage. Feels good, doesn't it? She asked, wiping her hands on her apron. It feels finished, I said, like I can finally breathe. My father had moved into a small one-bedroom apartment in Pilsen. We met there a week after sentencing, neutral ground away from the memories in the house. I've started therapy, he told me, serving me tea in his modest kitchen. Trying to understand how I let it happen, how I chose her over you and Anthony. And what have you learned? I asked. That grief makes you vulnerable. That loneliness is powerful, but that's not an excuse. It's just an explanation. He met my eyes. I let her dishonor your mother's memory. I let her try to steal from you. Those are my sins, not just hers. Yes, I agreed. They are. Can we try to rebuild? Not back to what was, but something new? I thought about it. Really thought about it. This man had failed me when I needed him most. But he was also my father, the man who'd taught me to ride a bike, who'd carried me on his shoulders, who'd loved my mother deeply once upon a time. "We can try," I said finally, "but it'll take time, and it'll be different. The father-daughter relationship we had, where I trusted you completely, that's gone. We'll have to build something else." He nodded, tears in his eyes. "I'll take whatever you're willing to give." It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But it was a door left slightly ajar instead of slammed shut. Karen's final exit happened on a gray morning in December. The restraining order required her to collect her personal belongings under police supervision. She arrived in a borrowed car, dressed in thrift store clothes, her hair unwashed. The woman who'd paraded around in Gucci was gone. What remained was just Karen. Ordinary, broke, facing consequences. Anthony and I watched from the porch as she loaded her single suitcase into the trunk. She looked up at us once, her face twisted with hatred. "I hope you're happy now," she shouted. I thought about it. Really considered the question. Was I happy? "No," I said, loud enough for her to hear, "but I'm at peace, and that's worth more than happiness." She drove away, and I never saw her again. Word around the neighborhood was that she'd moved in with her sister in Indiana, working retail to pay off the restitution, her wages garnished for years to come. Her real estate license was revoked, her reputation was destroyed. She'd become a cautionary tale, the gold digger who got caught. I didn't feel satisfaction in her downfall, just a quiet sense that the universe had balanced itself. Consequences had met actions. Justice had been served. My mother's jewelry, recovered from evidence lockup, sat in its mahogany box on my dresser. Mama Rose's wedding ring, great-grandmother's pearls, the locket with photographs of ancestors who'd survived so much worse than a gold-digging stepmother. They'd been trying to steal history, to liquidate legacy. They'd failed. The house on South Prairie Avenue stood firm, filled with 3 generations of memories, waiting to be passed to the next generation someday. Michelle's children, maybe? Anthony's kids? Patricia's grandchildren, who would grow up knowing their grandmother's story. I sat on the porch that evening, wrapped in one of Mama's quilts, drinking tea from her favorite cup. The autumn air was cold, but the house was warm, solid, protected. Mrs. Davis joined me, lowering herself carefully into the rocking chair. "You did good, baby girl," she said. "I did what Mama taught me. I built my empire in silence, and when the time came, I used it to protect what mattered." "Patricia's smiling down on you right now. I know she is." Maybe. Or maybe Mama was just nodding in satisfaction, the way she used to when I finally learned a lesson she'd been teaching. Not surprised. Just pleased that I'd finally understood. The empire had spoken. The legacy was secure. And I was finally home. Spring came to South Prairie Avenue like a resurrection. The house, my house now, truly and legally mine and Anthony's, needed work. Not Karen's modernization, but restoration, bringing back everything she'd tried to erase, every memory she'd attempted to liquidate. I started in the living room. The walls had been painted a sterile beige. Karen's idea of staging, but underneath, I knew, was Mama's sage green, the color she'd chosen because it reminds me of growth, baby girl. Always growing, always becoming. Anthony flew back from Atlanta, taking a leave of absence from his job. We worked side by side, scraping paint, revealing the colors underneath, like archaeologists uncovering history. "Remember when Mama made us help with this?" Anthony laughed, scraping at a stubborn corner. "I was 16 and so mad I couldn't go to that party." And she said, "You'll thank me when this house is yours someday." My voice caught. She knew we'd need these memories. We created a photo wall in the hallway, 3 generations of Johnsons looking down, Patricia and John on their wedding day, young and hopeful, Mama Rose in her Sunday best, fierce and proud, great-grandmother who'd been born into sharecropping but died owning land, anonymous ancestors whose names we didn't know but whose blood ran through our veins. Karen had taken these photos down. too cluttered, she'd said. But this wasn't clutter. This was proof that we'd survived, proof that we'd built something. Proof that 3 generations of Black women had fought so their children could stand on solid ground. The kitchen became my obsession. Mama's cookbooks, stained, annotated, filled with her handwriting, went back on the shelf above the stove. Her cast iron skillet, the one her mother had given her, the one Karen had tried to replace with modern nonstick, claimed its rightful place on the stovetop. And the peach cobbler. God, that peach cobbler. I'd tried making it a dozen times over the years. It never tasted right. Too sweet or not sweet enough. Crust too thick or too thin. Something always missing. But one Sunday afternoon in April, with Mrs. Davis supervising from a kitchen chair and Anthony peeling peaches, something clicked. Add more cinnamon, Mrs. Davis instructed. Your mama had a heavy hand with cinnamon. You said it was the secret. I added it. Generous, trusting. The scent filled the kitchen, and suddenly I was 8 years old again, standing on a step stool, watching Mama's hands work magic. When it came out of the oven, golden and bubbling, Mrs. Davis took one bite and her eyes filled with tears. That's it, she whispered. That's Patricia's cobbler. Baby girl, you did it. We started having Sunday dinners again. Not every week. My lupus still flared sometimes, leaving me exhausted. But when I could, me, Anthony, Mrs. Davis, and eventually, hesitantly, Dad. The first dinner with Dad was awkward. He sat at the table where he'd sat for 35 years, but everything was different. He was different. We were different. This looks wonderful, he said quietly as I set down the pot roast. Mama's recipe. Everything was Mama's recipe now. We ate mostly in silence. But it was a start. Mrs. Davis became our honorary grandmother, the role she'd been playing unofficially for years, made official by love and choice. She taught me Mama's garden secrets, how to grow tomatoes that actually produced, where to plant the collard greens, which flowers would survive Chicago's harsh winters. In May, we planted Patricia's favorites, roses, marigolds, black-eyed Susans. The backyard transformed from Karen's neglected wasteland back into the garden Mama had tended for decades. Your Mama always said flowers were proof of hope, Mrs. Davis told me as we dug holes for rose bushes. You plant something fragile and trust it'll survive. That's faith. My lupus management became part of the house's healing, too. I'd learned to listen to my body, to rest when I needed rest, to push when I could push. The stress of the trial had triggered flares, but now, with Karen gone and the house secure, my health stabilized. I transformed Mama's old sewing room into a meditation space. Soft lighting, plants, a yoga mat, a place to breathe, a place to heal. One evening, Anthony found me there, sitting cross-legged, eyes closed. Mom would be proud, sis, he said softly. I opened my eyes. You think? I know. Not just of how you handled Karen, though that was epic, but of this. He gestured around the house. You didn't just save Mama's legacy. You're living it, growing it. That's what she wanted. The house smelled like home again. Peach cobbler and fresh coffee and roses from the garden, not antiseptic air freshener and fake vanilla and Karen's overwhelming perfume. Home, finally, completely, irreversibly, home. Patricia's legacy wasn't just walls and memories. It was the act of protecting them, the choice to honor them, the decision to carry them forward, the power I'd built in silence, that majority stake in Chicago First National Bank. I'd used it to protect my family. But Mama had taught me something else, too. Power hoarded is power wasted. When you make it, baby girl, she'd said during one of our last conversations before she died, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget the people still fighting. I hadn't forgotten. 6 months after the trial, I sat in the bank's boardroom with a proposal that would change everything. The Community Health Investment Initiative, I began, displaying charts and statistics on the screen. Black women face disproportionate rates of chronic illness, lupus, diabetes, heart disease. We face higher rates of medical debt and bankruptcy. Our bank can address both issues. The board members, still mostly older white men, though I was working on that, looked skeptical. We partner with Northwestern Memorial, Rush University, and the Lupus Foundation of Illinois to create a comprehensive support program, free health screenings, financial counseling for medical debt, low-interest loans for necessary treatments, all focused on South and West Side communities. And the bank's benefit? Asked Richard Chen, the CFO. Community investment builds brand loyalty. It's good PR. But more than that, I leaned forward. It's the right thing to do. My mother died from cancer. I nearly died from lupus. I know what medical debt does to families. If we can help prevent that while building community trust, everyone wins. The vote passed 8-2. The Patricia Johnson Community Health Center opened on the South Side in September. Clean, modern, welcoming, staffed by doctors who listened to Black women's pain, who didn't dismiss symptoms, who treated us like humans deserving care. I taught financial literacy workshops there twice a month. Protect Your Assets, Estate Planning 101. Understanding Medical Debt, Building Wealth in Silence. That last one always got knowing smiles. The scholarship fund came next, the Patricia Johnson Memorial Scholarship for students who'd lost parents to cancer, full ride to any Illinois university. In the first year, we funded 12 students. One was a girl named Jasmine, 17, who'd lost her mother to breast cancer just like I had. She came to my office to thank me, tears streaming down her face. My mom worked 2 jobs, she said. She always told me education was the way out, but when she died, I thought college was impossible. This scholarship, it's not just money, it's keeping her dream alive. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to cry. The media attention was unexpected but welcome. Chicago Tribune ran a feature, Bank Executive Turns Personal Tragedy into Community Triumph. NPR interviewed me for a segment on corporate responsibility. You could have used your position purely for profit, the interviewer said. Why choose community investment? My mother taught me to build your empire in silence, I said, but use it to make noise for others. Power should lift people up, not keep them down. The interview went viral in Black professional circles. I started getting invited to speak at conferences, universities, corporate events. Standing at a podium at Northwestern's business school, looking out at eager young faces, I told them, being underestimated is a gift. It means people show you their true nature before they realize you have power to respond. Build your empire quietly, then use it loudly for those who need it. My career trajectory changed. Regional bank president at 37, the youngest woman, the first Black woman to hold the position. Not just because of my business acumen, but because I'd proven that profit and purpose could coexist. Anthony quit his Atlanta job permanently and started a nonprofit, Patricia's House. Its mission, helping families fight inheritance fraud, providing legal support for those facing what we'd faced. How many Michelles are out there? He said at the launch event. Fighting vultures while they're sick or grieving? How many don't have the resources to fight back? We're going to be their resource. The nonprofit operated out of a small office on 47th Street. Pro bono lawyers, financial advisors, social workers, a team dedicated to protecting vulnerable people from predatory family members. Karen had accidentally created something beautiful, a network of protection so others wouldn't suffer what I'd suffered. Your mama's legacy is growing, Mrs. Davis told me at the nonprofit's 1-year anniversary celebration. She planted seeds. You're tending the garden. Patricia's legacy wasn't just a house anymore. It was health centers and scholarships and legal protection and community investment. It was the empire she'd taught me to build, finally making noise for people who needed it. She'd taught me power. I was teaching others to build their own. My father's redemption wasn't dramatic. It was slow, painful, honest work. He'd started therapy the week after the trial ended. Dr. Morrison, a black male therapist who specialized in grief and trauma. Every Tuesday at 4 p.m., Dad sat in that office and faced what he'd done. We met for coffee monthly, neutral ground, a diner on 43rd Street, away from the memories in the house. Dr. Morrison asked me why I let it happen, Dad said during one of these meetings, stirring sugar into his coffee. Why I chose Karen over you and Anthony. And what did you say? I was so lonely after your mom. The house was so quiet. Every room reminded me of her, and the pain was unbearable. He looked up, eyes red. Karen filled that silence. She made me feel needed again, desired. And I was so desperate for that feeling that I ignored every red flag, every warning, every time she disrespected Patricia's memory. Grief makes us vulnerable, I said. It wasn't forgiveness, just acknowledgement. But I chose comfort over integrity. That's on me, not the grief. My choices. His voice cracked. I let her try to steal from you while you were fighting for your life. What kind of father does that? I didn't answer, because we both knew. The relationship rebuilt slowly, not back to what it was, that was impossible, but into something new, more honest, more careful. Dad started volunteering at Patricia's house, filing paperwork, answering phones, whatever they needed. One day, Anthony called me, voice tight with emotion. "There's a woman here," he said. "Her stepson is trying to steal her late husband's house. She's elderly. Confused, scared. And Dad, Michelle, Dad sat with her for an hour, held her hand, told her his story, told her she wasn't alone. He made her understand she could fight back." "Is he okay?" I asked. "He's crying, but he's okay. He's doing the work." In June, we dedicated Patricia's memorial garden at the Community Health Center. Roses and marigolds and black-eyed Susans, a bronze plaque, in memory of Patricia Rose Johnson, educator, mother, warrior. Dad stood beside me at the dedication, tears streaming down his face. "I let you down when you needed me most," he said quietly as the crowd mingled after the ceremony. "I can't undo that, but I can spend every day trying to honor her memory the way you have." I looked at this man, my father, who'd failed me catastrophically, but was now doing the hard work of change. "I can't forget what happened," I said honestly, "but I can try to understand, and maybe, eventually, that's enough." "It's more than I deserve," he said. "Yes," I agreed, "it is." Our relationship would never be what it was. The trust was gone, shattered by his choices during my darkest hour, but we were building something different, more realistic, more boundaried, a relationship between two adults who'd both been wounded and were learning to heal. Dad's health improved without Karen's toxicity. He'd lost weight, stress weight from her chaos. His blood pressure normalized. He smiled more. Real smiles, not the forced ones from the Karen era. "I'm proud of you," he told me one evening as we sat on the porch of the house, his life estate, my property, "not just for beating Karen, for what you've built. Your mother, Patricia, would be so proud." "I know," I said, and I did. Forgiveness is complex. It's not a switch you flip, a moment of grace that erases harm. It's a choice you make daily, sometimes hourly, to not let someone else's failures poison your future. I chose to leave the door ajar, not wide open, not yet, maybe not ever, but not slammed shut either. Sometimes that's all redemption looks like, the chance to do better, even when you can never undo the worst. I didn't go looking for information about Karen, but in a neighborhood like ours, gossip flows like water. Mrs. Davis would mention something she'd heard from her sister in Indiana. Anthony would report back from his nonprofit work. Apparently, Karen's name had become shorthand for inheritance fraud predator. The picture that emerged was exactly what I'd expected. Consequences meeting actions. Karen was working retail at a discount store in Gary, Indiana, not managing, just working the floor, straightening shelves, dealing with customers who treated her the way she'd once treated service workers. Minimum wage, no benefits, exhausting work. Her wages were garnished. The court order required her to pay $1,200 monthly toward her restitution, nearly half her take-home pay. She'd be paying it off for at least 7 years. She lived in a studio apartment in a building with questionable plumbing. The Florida condo dream? Dead. The designer lifestyle? Gone. The social circle she'd cultivated? Evaporated the moment her arrest made the news. No one wants to associate with someone who stole from a sick woman, Mrs. Davis reported with satisfaction. That's the kind of evil people can't forgive. Diane Murphy, Karen's real estate agent accomplice, faced her own reckoning. License revoked, fraud charges, her career destroyed. She'd tried to flip one too many properties with shady under-the-table deals, and the investigation I'd triggered pulled it all into light. Sometimes I drove past Karen's workplace. Not often. Maybe twice a year when I visited Anthony's nonprofit near Gary. I'd see her through the window, older looking, harder, straightening racks of cheap clothes. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no triumph, no revenge sweetness. Just nothing. Does it bother you? My therapist asked. That she's suffering? I thought about it. No, because I didn't cause her suffering. She did. Every choice she made led her to that discount store in Gary. I just stopped letting her destroy my life in the process. That was the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is active. You cause harm to balance scales. Justice is passive. You stop enabling harm and let natural consequences flow. I didn't destroy Karen. She destroyed herself. I just stopped being her victim. Karma isn't magic, I told a young woman at Patricia's house who was fighting her own inheritance battle. It's not some mystical force that punishes wrongdoers. Karma is just consequences meeting actions. You lie, cheat, steal. Eventually, no one trusts you. You exploit vulnerable people. Eventually, you become vulnerable yourself. That's not karma. That's just life. The woman nodded, taking notes. She'd been trying to understand how her stepfather had manipulated her sick mother, trying to understand how someone could be so cruel. Evil isn't complicated, I continued. It's usually just greed wearing a mask of concern. The mask slips eventually, and when it does, everyone sees what was always underneath. Patricia had taught me something during her illness, something I hadn't understood until years later. Baby girl, protect yourself, not because you're weak, because you're strong enough to matter. Strong people have something worth stealing. Build your empire in silence, but build walls around it too. I'd built those walls. Karen had crashed against them and destroyed herself in the process. Sometimes I wondered if she understood, if she lay in her studio apartment at night, surrounded by secondhand furniture and the smell of mildew, and realized that she'd done this to herself, that she'd gambled on a sick woman being too weak to fight back and lost everything when I proved strong enough to dismantle her, piece by piece, consequence by consequence. Or maybe she still blamed me. Maybe in her version of events, I was the villain, the ungrateful stepdaughter who ruined her chance at happiness. I'd learned to be okay with being someone's villain, because the people who matter, the ones who showed up when I was in that hospital bed, who protected Patricia's memory, who built something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal, they knew the truth. Dignity can't be stolen, Patricia had told me once, only surrendered. I didn't surrender, not to the lupus, not to Karen, not to the injustice of it all. And now, I taught others not to surrender either. That was Patricia's legacy, not the house, not the money, not the revenge, the refusal to surrender. So here's what I want you to understand, whoever you are, wherever you're watching this from. If you're in a hospital bed right now, fighting your own battle while someone tries to steal from you, you're not alone. If you're grieving and someone's circling like a vulture, you're not alone. If you've been betrayed by family, underestimated because you're sick or young or female or black or just at a vulnerable moment, you're not alone. I'm Michelle. I'm 38 now. My lupus is managed. My mother's house stands firm on South Prairie Avenue in Chicago, filled with memories and rose scent and the promise of Sunday dinners. And I'm here to tell you, you can fight back. You can protect what matters. But first, let me share some truths that Patricia taught me. Truths I learned in hospital beds and courtrooms and silent moments of rage that could have consumed me. Universal truth number 1, family isn't always blood. It's who shows up when you're at your lowest. My father married my blood. But Mrs. Davis, my elderly neighbor who took 3 buses to visit me in the hospital, she's family. Anthony, who dropped everything to fight beside me? Family. The people who show up when you're weak, who protect you when you're vulnerable, that's family. Blood can betray you. Choose your family by their actions, not their DNA. Universal truth, Hanura 2. Build your power in silence, not for revenge, but for protection. Mama told me to invest quietly, to build my empire without announcing it. I thought it was about humility. It wasn't. It was about strategy. When no one knows your strength, they reveal their true intentions. Karen showed me exactly who she was because she thought I was powerless. Your power, whatever it is, education, money, connections, legal knowledge, build it quietly, not to hurt people, but to protect yourself when someone tries to hurt you. Universal truth, number 3, your mother's legacy isn't just what she left you, it's what you do with it. Patricia left me a house, but her real legacy was her wisdom, her strength, her refusal to surrender. I honored that legacy not just by protecting the house, but by building something that helps others. The health center, the scholarships, the nonprofit, that's Patricia's legacy growing. What did your mother, grandmother, ancestor teach you? How will you carry it forward? And specifically to my Black women watching this, they'll doubt your pain. They'll question your strength. They'll underestimate your power. Let them. Let them think you're weak while you build your empire in silence. Let them doubt your pain while you document everything. Let them underestimate your power while you position yourself 3 moves ahead. We've been surviving impossible things for generations. This is just one more thing we'll survive and transform into something powerful. Here's my legal advice. Learn the hard way. Protect your inheritance. Get everything in writing. Don't just trust. Verify. Review documents. Keep copies. Know where the money goes. A will isn't enough if no one enforces it. And if someone tries to steal from you when you're vulnerable, document everything. Bank statements, text messages, witness testimonies, medical records proving when you were incapacitated. Build an airtight case. Then let the legal system do what it's designed to do. The healing isn't in revenge, it's in reclamation. Reclaiming your power, your space, your legacy, your dignity. Karen didn't take those things from me because I didn't let her. You don't have to let anyone take them from you either. Drop your city in the comments if you face something similar. Build community. Share resources. You're not alone in this fight. If you believe families should protect each other, not prey on vulnerability during illness or grief, leave a like. Let's build a community that says no to inheritance fraud, no to elder abuse, no to people who exploit weakness. Patricia taught me that dignity can't be stolen, only surrendered. I didn't surrender. And neither should you. Fight for your legacy. Build your empire. Protect what matters. And when someone tries to take it from you, remember, the best victories aren't the loudest. They're the ones where consequences meet actions, where justice flows naturally from choices made, where you don't have to destroy anyone because they destroy themselves. Stand firm. Document everything. Trust yourself. And know that somewhere in Chicago, a Black woman who nearly died in a hospital bed and lost everything is now thriving, running a bank, healing her community, living in her mother's house, at peace. If I can do it, so can you. This is Michelle Johnson, signing off from South Prairie Avenue, where dignity was never surrendered, where legacy lives on, where Patricia's daughter built an empire in silence and used it to change the world. Thank you for listening to my story. Now go write yours.